She handed him a check for $2 million. He handed it right back. Nobody in Clearwater Valley could explain it. A man with no job, no savings, a 9-year-old son with asthma, turning down $2 million like it was a wrong number call he didn't have time for. Who does that? Logan Cole, apparently. He was 35, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet in his eyes you only earn after carrying something heavy for a very long time. He wore a faded green flannel over a gray tee. His hair, as usual, was going in 3 different directions. His son Garrett had once asked him if he owned a comb. Logan said yes. He was fairly sure that was still true. 7 years repairing military jets and helicopters, conditions that would make most people reconsider their career choices. He came home to Clearwater Valley, a quiet suburb an hour south of Seattle, with a discharge, a toolbox, and a boy who had just turned 3. Rebecca, his wife, had died 6 months before. No gradual adjustment period. He simply became a father, full-time, alone, and got on with it. 6 years later, the two of them had their rhythms. The old wooden fishing boat, the cabin that smelled like pine and aged paper, and the cedar chest in the corner that still held Rebecca's winter sweaters. Neither Logan nor Garrett had worked out what to do with that yet. The ancient percolator that groaned every morning like it had opinions about the weather, made coffee in exactly 11 minutes regardless of how badly you needed it sooner. That Saturday started the way every good Saturday started. Badly. By Garrett's assessment. "You see any bass out there?" Logan called from the boat. Garrett was flat on the dock, belly down. Airplanes, from Kitty Hawk to the jet age, open in front of him. He'd read it 4 times, working on 5. He didn't look up. "I see a man who hasn't caught anything in 3 Saturdays. Logan pointed at him. "Smart mouth on a kid who needs a ride home." Garrett grinned into his book. Between pages, he coughed softly. That small, familiar sound. The one that lived in Logan's chest like a second heartbeat. Not from fear, exactly. From the specific alertness of a father who has learned that the gap between fine and not fine can be about 30 seconds. Then the sky tore open. The sound came first. Low. Wrong. A grinding roar with no business being over a quiet lake on a Saturday. Logan was on his feet before he'd processed it. 7 years of military aircraft had wired that alarm into him below conscious thought. His body knew that sound the way it knows the smell of rain before the clouds arrive. A private jet, banking hard left, black smoke from the right engine, nose dropping. Too steep, too fast, no recovery angle in it. "Dad." Garrett's voice dropped to almost nothing. The jet hit the water 200 yards out. Logan was already moving. No pause, no calculation. He hit the lake running. The water was cold enough to drive the breath clean out of him. He kept going anyway. Through fuel fumes and scorched metal and cold churned sediment. He dove once, came up empty. Dove again. His hand closed around an arm. A woman, unconscious, still strapped in. The cockpit tilted at an angle that had probably saved her from sinking any faster. He got her free, got her to the surface, got her breathing. He stayed until the paramedics arrived, answered their questions, watched the ambulance pull away. Then he went home and made Garrett a grilled cheese, because Garrett had missed lunch in all the commotion and was, in his own words, approaching a hunger emergency. Logan did not ask the woman's name. It did not occur to him that he should. What settled into him quietly, the way cold water settles into everything it touches, was a simpler awareness. A day like this one never just ended cleanly. It always had a second half. He just didn't know yet what the second half looked like. The next morning, Logan stood in the kitchen waiting on the percolator. Minute 9 of 11. Not a second sooner. When the news chyron rolled across the television screen. Breaking. Billionaire CEO Letitia Voss survives jet crash in Clearwater Valley. Rescued by local resident. He turned it off, poured his coffee, looked at Rebecca's photograph on the windowsill. The 4th of July picture, 2015. her laughing at something off camera, a paper plate balanced in one hand. He thought about whether Garrett needed new sneakers before the school year ended. What he did not think about, could not have imagined, was that by the time that coffee was cold, the most powerful executive in the Pacific Northwest would be on his dirt road, with a legal contract and a check that could buy his entire neighborhood, completely certain he was going to take it. She had never been more wrong about anything in her life. But here is what nobody at the church potluck or the hardware store ever talked about afterward. The check wasn't even the most important thing she brought, what she carried without knowing it. Sealed in her own company's files for 6 years, sitting quietly on a server that had survived 2 scheduled deletions, was the truth about how Rebecca died. And once that truth came out, nothing in Clearwater Valley would sit still again. What happened when those car doors opened? And what Logan said that stopped Letitia Voss cold in her designer shoes is something none of her lawyers could have prepared her for. They came at 8:13 in the morning. Logan was splitting firewood in the side yard. The steady, satisfying kind of work that crowds out everything else. He heard gravel popping under tires, straightened up, axe still in hand, watched 10 black Cadillacs, moving in a slow, deliberate line, not a speck of mud on any of them, which on his road meant someone had run them through a car wash that morning specifically for this visit. The kind of entrance designed to make a man feel small before anyone said a word. Logan set down the axe. The lead car stopped. The door opened. She was 37. She moved like someone who had never once in her adult life waited for permission to enter a room. Black hair pulled back in a sharp ponytail, a blazer that cost more than Logan's truck, a fading bruise on her left temple, the only visible sign that 2 days earlier she had been underwater, unconscious, entirely at the mercy of a stranger. She walked straight toward him, no greeting, no preamble. She held out a thick envelope and a folded document. "You saved my life." Her voice was crisp and practiced, the kind accustomed to being the last word spoken. "This is fair compensation. Sign the NDA." A pause. Measured. Deliberate. Mechanic. Logan looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. "I don't need your money," he said, "and I'm not signing anything." Something behind Letitia's eyes recalibrated. Quiet. Internal. She was used to people refusing for effect. This didn't feel like effect. This felt like a man who had said exactly what he meant and was now waiting, without impatience, for the conversation to move on. "Most people would have filmed it and posted it online by now," she said. "I don't have a TikTok," Logan said. She studied him for a moment. Then, without being invited, she stepped past him toward the open cabin door and stopped. The walls of Logan's living room were covered in hand-drawn technical schematics. Not printouts, not textbook diagrams. Hand-drawn. In mechanical pencil. Lines clean and precise, annotated in a careful, small hand. Hydraulic system diagrams, fuel feed sequences, engine cross-sections, and covering the better part of one wall. A pressure monitoring design for high-altitude private aircraft that Letitia recognized, with a cold and sudden clarity, as addressing the exact category of failure that had nearly killed her 48 hours ago. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. This man was not what she had prepared for. She filed that away and said nothing about it. She was gone by 10 o'clock. By noon, the town had already moved on without her. Someone leaked the rescue footage online. Shaky, shot from the far shore, but clear enough. A man leaving a fishing boat. A jet going down in the background. The whole sequence, from dock to water, with a caption designed to ask questions it had no interest in answering fairly. Hero or setup. Local mechanic saves CEO right outside his own cabin. The comments arrive fast, as they always do, and they move faster than any correction ever could. By the next morning, Logan's supervisor Dale, a man who had known him 4 years, who had eaten his chili at the block party, who had asked him to look at a truck transmission twice, met him in the garage parking lot instead of inside. Couldn't quite hold eye contact. They're calling it a liability situation, Dale said. Just until things settle down. Things had a way of not settling down. At the grocery store, a woman from the church choir moved to the far aisle before Logan reached her. Two men near the hardware display went quiet mid-sentence. A neighbor who had borrowed his extension ladder last fall looked straight through him like a stranger, which required a specific and practiced kind of effort. The quiet withdrawal of a community that had decided, not loudly, not with cruelty exactly, but with the efficient finality of a door closing in cold weather. You feel the draft long before you hear the latch. Garrett came home the next morning with red eyes, his jaw set in the careful way of a child trying to hold something together that very much wants to fall apart. He dropped his backpack on the floor. He never did that. He was a careful kid. Hung it on the hook by the door, same peg, every day. Dad. He said it like it cost him something. Kids at school are saying you set the whole thing up, that you wanted to be on TV, that you're a fraud. He said that last word like it had left a mark on his mouth. Logan sat on the edge of the kitchen table and held out his arms. Garrett came. He smelled like school lunch pizza and the cedar in his bedroom closet. Logan held him the way you hold something you would give up everything you own to protect. Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand, Logan said quietly. That's not about you. That's not really even about me. Garrett was quiet for a moment. I don't want to go back. I know. A pause. But I will, Garrett said. Logan closed his eyes. Yeah, he said softly. I know that too. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of the Voss Dynamics Tower in Seattle, Letitia was standing at the window with a tablet, reviewing the flight data from the day of the crash. Something in it was wrong. The transponder gap was not atmospheric interference. The signal suppression was brief, surgical, deliberate, the kind that leaves no fingerprint unless you know exactly what pattern to look for. Someone with authorized system access had interfered with her navigation data. The question was when. The more pressing question was why. She thought of the hand-drawn schematics on Logan's cabin wall. She thought of a man who had known without hesitation exactly how to find a submerged cockpit. She picked up her phone. Full background on Logan Cole, the man from Clearwater Lake, military service record, employment history, any contact with Voss Dynamics or affiliated contractors, and I want someone watching the property. She set the phone down. She was wrong about all of it. She would come to understand that, and it would cost her something real to face, but not yet. That same afternoon, Logan was driving back from the hardware store. The porch railing still needed fixing regardless of anything else. When he rounded the bend on Old Mill Road and found a woman in a green cardigan standing behind a white Buick, both hands on the bumper, pushing, getting nowhere. He pulled over, no deliberation. He helped push the car to the gravel shoulder, found a loose battery connection under the hood, had it running with a flathead from his truck in under 6 minutes. The woman, 70-ish, reading glasses pushed up on her head. The kind of face that had laughed a great deal and planned to keep going. Patted his arm and said, God bless. Logan nodded, got back in his truck, drove home. Neither of them noticed the security camera mounted on the utility pole 20 feet away. Neither of them knew the woman was Dolores, the mother of a senior engineer at Voss Dynamics. And neither of them could have guessed that the footage would travel, quietly and without fanfare, all the way to a glass office on the 14th floor of a high-rise in Seattle. Letitia watched it 3 times. The way he didn't pause to look around first. The way his hands found the fault with the easy confidence of someone who understands machines not as a skill, but as a language. The way he helped and left without waiting to be thanked. She sat with it for a long time. He doesn't move like someone working an angle, so why is he still this kind? When the whole town has turned its back on him. And he has every reason not to be. For the first time since the crash, genuine doubt moved in. Quiet, slow, impossible to push back out. Like a draft under a door she had been certain was closed. What she still hadn't found. Sitting in a sealed archive 3 floors below her own office, was evidence that Logan had tried to warn her company long before the crash, and that someone she trusted had made sure that warning never reached her desk. She came alone this time. No convoy, no paperwork, no attorneys waiting in the car with the engine running. Just one black Cadillac, moving quietly down the dirt road at 3 in the afternoon on day 3. Parking where the gravel gave out and the grass took over. Letitia crossed the yard in the long afternoon light. She moved differently than she had 2 days ago, still straight-backed, still composed, but something had shifted underneath it. The way a door shifts when the wood swells in summer. Barely visible from the outside, unmistakable once you know what to look for. Logan was on the porch. He watched her come. He didn't say anything. She stopped at the bottom step. "If you really understand aircraft," she said, "tell me what caused the engine failure on my jet." Not a request, a test. She had learned early in her career that the fastest way to find out what a person actually knew was to ask them to prove it. Without warning, without preparation. Most people bluffed or froze. Either way, you had your answer. Logan crossed his arms, looked at the middle distance for 2 seconds, not performing thought, just finding the right starting point. Then he began. He walked her through the hydraulic sequence with the specificity of someone who had studied this failure category for years, not days. A progressive pressure variance in the port side actuator, the kind that develops under sustained low-altitude stress across multiple flight cycles. Presents first as minor sensor fluctuation before it becomes structural. He explained why the Meridian Series primary warning system wouldn't flag it until the failure was already in motion. The threshold calibration was designed for cruise altitude behavior, not the stress profile of repeated short-haul descents. He named the exact temperature band in which the fault became critical. Why a spring morning over the valley? With the jet flying low to cut travel time, would have placed her directly inside that window. He finished. He was not out of breath. He hadn't consulted a single diagram. Letitia had not opened her mouth since he started. "You submitted a warning," she said. Still not a question. She had already begun to suspect it from the archived contractor logs she'd reviewed that morning. 14 months ago, Logan said. Through a former colleague named Marcus Webb. He was a maintenance contractor with your division. I'd seen the same actuator stress pattern in military equipment. Different manufacturer, identical engineering logic, identical failure point under load. He paused. I wrote it up thoroughly. Marcus passed it along through the proper channel. What happened to it? Logan looked at her steadily and said nothing. He didn't need to. Letitia stood in the late afternoon light, very still, with the particular expression of someone whose mind has just completed a calculation they didn't want to finish. The warning had never reached her. She had never seen it. Someone inside her own organization had received a documented safety flag about the aircraft she flew regularly and had decided, without telling her, that it did not require her attention. "You're not just a mechanic," she said. The word landed differently than it had 2 days ago, when she had used it as a category. Now it sounded like what it had quietly become, a small, overdue correction. Logan gave a quiet smile, not proud, not bitter, something closer to tired, and at peace with the tiredness. "I'm just a father who wants his son to be proud of him." Garrett appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, as 9-year-olds reliably do, materializing without warning or apparent awareness that anything significant was happening. He was carrying a balsa wood airplane kit he'd been working on for 2 weeks, one wing slightly crooked. The landing gear situation remained. Diplomatically speaking, a work in progress. He looked at his father, assessed Letitia with the frank and unhurried evaluation children perform on unfamiliar adults. Arrived at his conclusion. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Letitia said. "Are you the lady from the lake?" "Yes," she said, "I am." Garrett considered this. "You should probably say thank you." Logan drew a slow breath. "He's right," Letitia said. Before Logan could redirect, her voice had gone softer than she'd planned. He's completely right. She looked at Logan directly. This time, there was no professional register in it. "Thank you," she said. Logan took the model airplane from Garrett and set it on the porch rail. He crouched down and looked at the tail assembly. The rear stabilizer was off by 0.5 millimeter. Which sounds trivial until you understand that in a model this size, 0.5 millimeter of angular error at the tail translates to a progressive curve in flight that ends, reliably, with the nose in the ground. He explained this to Garrett plainly, without simplifying. Garrett had always preferred real explanations over easy ones. "Hold the fuselage steady," Logan said. "Don't press, just hold." "Like this?" "Exactly like that. Don't move." Letitia had drifted to the edge of the porch without quite deciding to. She was telling herself she was still processing the conversation. The actuator warning. The name Marcus Webb. Whoever in her organization had intercepted it. She was telling herself that. But what she was actually watching was the way Logan was with his son. Patient, precise, unhurried, as if Garrett were the most important project he had ever worked on, and he intended to get every piece of it right. And the way Garrett looked up at his father, with a trust so complete and unself-conscious it made something ache in the back of her throat. She had not known that, growing up. Her father had handed her the company like an exam she'd better not fail. Her uncle had praised her in public and worked around her in private for as long as she could remember. She had built her entire career on the premise that relying on someone was a negotiating disadvantage. This 9-year-old boy looked at his father like needing someone was simply the way things worked, as natural and unquestioned as breathing. Her hand was resting on the porch rail. Logan reached past Garrett to reset the glue joint. His hand brushed hers. Brief, accidental. The kind of contact neither person arranges and neither person can quite dismiss. They both went still. Not dramatically, just still. The way a room goes quiet after an unexpected sound, and everyone waits without knowing they're waiting. Letitia looked down at her hand for a moment, then out at the tree line. She was 37 years old. She had run a company with 4,000 employees since she was 32. She was not going to stand on a porch in Clearwater Valley and lose her bearings over a man she had met 4 days ago. "The tail will hold," Logan said to Garrett, not looking at her. "You sure?" "Mostly." "Dad." 80%, that's a solid margin. Garrett accepted this as a reasonable engineering confidence interval and went back inside. Letitia stayed another 40 minutes. They sat on the porch steps, not by arrangement, simply the natural way two people sit when there is nowhere else obvious to be. She asked him about the pressure monitoring system on the wall. He explained it. She asked specific, technical questions. He answered without simplifying. She pushed back on 2 of his assumptions. He reconsidered one of them and told her so directly. She noticed. When she stood to leave, the sun was low, the shadows long. "The investigation is still open," she said. "I know. If someone inside my organization buried that warning, that's yours to solve," Logan said. Quiet, clean, not unkind. She nodded, walked to the Cadillac, opened the door and paused, hand on the roof, not turning around. Standing for a moment in the long fading light as though there was something she meant to say and hadn't found the shape of it yet. Then she got in and drove. Logan sat back down on the steps. The screen door opened. "Was she looking at you in a weird way?" Garrett said. "Or was that just me? Go wash up for dinner." "I'm just noting what I observed." "Garrett." The screen door banged shut. Logan looked out at the road where the dust was still settling. He sat with what he was feeling, whatever it was, without reaching for his usual habit of deciding it didn't matter. That was new. What Letitia found when she returned to Seattle that evening. In a sealed archive she had never been given a reason to open, would rewrite everything she thought she already knew about the past 6 years. The storm arrived fast on the night of day 4, not the slow, considerate kind of Pacific Northwest rain that gives you time to move the lawn chairs inside and find your jacket in the hall closet where you left it last October. The fast kind, the sideways kind, the kind that turns dirt roads into something you would rather not navigate in the dark with a child in the car. Logan heard the first thunder at 9. He checked on Garrett at 9:15. His son was already awake, sitting up in bed with the particular stillness of a child trying hard not to alarm anyone, even in the low light from the hallway. Logan could see the effort, the shallow draw of each breath, the slight forward hunch of small shoulders working harder than they should have to. Garrett's hand was moving toward the nightstand. His inhaler wasn't there. Logan checked the nightstand, the floor, the windowsill, the backpack on the doorknob. He knew where the inhaler was, in the kitchen drawer. Empty, waiting to be refilled. He had moved that refill to the bottom of the week's list after losing his job. When the money started running its own arithmetic, the prescription ran $62 with insurance. He had told himself he'd get to it by Friday. Friday had come and gone. "Okay," he said, in the steady voice he had practiced so many times it had become genuine. "We're going to the hospital, right now." "Dad, I know, we're still going." He wrapped Garrett in the old quilt from the bed, the faded blue square one that had been Rebecca's mother's. Washed so many times it was more comfort than cotton. Carried him out to the truck. The rain hit them like something personal. Logan got Garrett buckled, ran to the driver's side, started the engine. The dirt road was already running with water. He made it 30 yards before his headlights found the low crossing at Miller Creek. The creek had taken the road. Dark water, fast-moving, carrying debris. He could not risk it, not with Garrett counting each breath in the passenger seat, trying not to let his father see how frightened he was. Logan called for an ambulance. The dispatcher was honest, 18 minutes, minimum, and the creek crossing would add time she couldn't promise. He pulled the truck back to the drive, lifted Garrett out, and stood at the edge of the yard in the pouring rain, holding his son, talking to him in the low, even voice he used when steady was the only thing he had left to offer. "Eyes on me, bud." "I'm looking at you, Dad." "Good. Keep doing that." He stood there in the rain and did the only useful thing left. He kept Garrett focused on his face. He waited. The water ran down the back of his neck. There was nothing more his hands could do. He had been to Afghanistan. He had worked on aircraft going down. He had never felt more helpless than he did standing in his own front yard on a Tuesday night in April. The headlights came through the rain before he heard the engine. Fast, purposeful, not slowing for the ruts. The black Cadillac stopped 10 feet away. The door was open before the car had fully stopped. "Letitia." She took one look at Garrett and said one word, "Get in." She drove without commentary, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, making every turn without hesitation. Logan sat in the back with Garrett on his lap and the quilt around both of them. He did not ask how she happened to be on this road in this storm at this hour. He would ask later. The answer was simple. After reviewing the transponder data and the buried contractor warning that afternoon, feeling the weight of what she was beginning to understand, Letitia had quietly asked her security team to keep an eye on the cabin. Not from suspicion, she was well past that. The reason was something she didn't yet have a clean word for. When the security detail called and described a man carrying a child into a rainstorm with a flooded road ahead. She had already been in her car, 22 minutes, a private hospital, the kind with a lobby that looked like a hotel, and staff who understood that time was the actual currency. Garrett was on oxygen within 4 minutes of arrival. The color came back into his face, slowly at first, and then all at once. The way dawn moves. Letitia covered every expense without mentioning it. The waiting room was quiet and too clean. Chairs more comfortable than waiting room chairs had any right to be. The rain on the windows had gone gentle. Logan sat bent forward, elbows on knees, hands folded, staring at the middle distance. Letitia sat across from him. Neither of them said anything for a while. Some moments need to finish settling before words help. Then she leaned forward and placed her hand over his. He looked up. "When you refused the check," she said carefully, "I assumed you were holding out for something larger. I thought everyone who crossed my path was calculating something." She looked at their hands, But you stood in a flooded yard in the pouring rain, holding your son in a quilt, just talking to him, just keeping him looking at you. Logan's throat moved. "He's all I have left," he said. His voice came out very quiet. "Since his mother passed, Garrett is all I have left of any of it." Letitia's eyes filled. She didn't look away. She didn't reset her expression into the controlled face of a woman who had spent 15 years making sure no boardroom ever saw her this way. She simply sat there. At 11 o'clock at night in a hospital waiting room, and let it happen. The woman who had arrived at Logan's cabin 4 days ago, sharp ponytail, signed NDA. The word mechanic, used like a filing label, was gone. What remained was someone who had been moving very fast for a very long time and had, in a quiet room in the rain, finally stopped. Garrett was discharged the following morning. He ate scrambled eggs and toast with the deep satisfaction of a person who has been through something and come out the other side and is now very hungry. He fell asleep in the car on the way home. Logan carried him inside and settled him on the couch with a nature documentary on low. When Logan stepped back out to the porch, the Cadillac was gone. On the kitchen table, placed neatly beside his father's percolator, was a small paper bag. Inside, a new inhaler, 3 hardcover airplane books. The kind you keep, not the library kind, and a handwritten note card in a precise, slightly angular script Logan recognized now. Not charity, just gratitude. L. He read it twice, set it down, picked it up again. He walked to the window. Clearwater Valley was washed and bright after the storm, every pine needle holding its own small piece of the morning light. Rebecca's photograph smiled from the windowsill, the 4th of July picture, the paper plate, mid-laugh. All of it exactly as it had always been. Something in Logan's chest, something that had been very still for 6 years. The way a compass needle locks when you hold it too close to a magnet, shifted, just slightly, just enough that he noticed and did not look away from it. What Letitia discovered when she reached her office that afternoon, sealed in an archive she had never been given a reason to open, had been sitting there for 6 years. And the name inside it was one Logan had been grieving the entire time. The file was buried in a legal archive labeled "Closed, no further action." It had been sitting there for 6 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Misfiled under a contractor reference number, placed on a server that had survived 2 scheduled deletions through the quiet stubbornness of old institutional storage systems. Never once flagged for review. Letitia found it on day 6 at 2 in the morning, alone in her office. A cold cup of coffee, the particular stillness on her face that means the mind is running hard enough to ask everything else to wait. The investigation had led her backward through 3 layers of contractor shell records, a buried internal liability memo, a product safety review that had been opened, evaluated, and quietly reclassified as an edge case anomaly not requiring further action. The product in question was a brake actuator component, manufactured by a Voss Dynamics subsidiary. The documented fault caused a progressive failure of the primary brake system under a specific combination of road conditions and temperature range that were, as the original engineer's report had noted with careful understatement, not rare in the Pacific Northwest in autumn. 47 vehicles in the affected production run. A formal recall had been recommended. The cost projection had been prepared and presented to a subcommittee. And then, in a meeting that had no official minutes and no recording, the recommendation had been set aside. The name authorizing that decision was Belen Voss, her uncle, her father's younger brother, the man who had sat in the front row at her college graduation and told her she was the sharpest person in the family. Letitia sat with that for a long time. She pulled the accident records next. Public filings, September 2018. A woman named Rebecca Cole, 29 years old, had died when her vehicle's brakes failed on a rain-slicked state highway outside Clearwater Valley. Her car was number 31 of 47 in the affected production lot. Logan had known. He had written letters to the company, submitted documentation through a regional safety office, reached out through a contractor he trusted. He had done everything available to a private citizen with no platform and no resources except the evidence in his hands. Every communication had been intercepted, rerouted into a filing system designed to receive things and never surface them again. By Belen. Letitia closed the archive. She opened it again. She read Rebecca's name one more time, because certain things require being read more than once before the mind will accept them as real. Then she picked up her phone. Emergency board meeting, 7 a.m. tomorrow. The boardroom had the particular silence of a room full of people who already sense that something is about to change, each privately calculating which side of that change they intend to occupy. Belen sat at the far end of the table, 63 years old, silver-haired, hands folded on the polished surface, the composed patience of a man who had walked into rooms like this one for 4 decades and walked out of all of them intact. He looked at Letitia with the measured calm of someone who has prepared for several versions of this conversation. Letitia set the files on the table. She did not raise her voice. She had learned long ago that volume is what you use when the facts alone aren't enough. Today, the facts were more than sufficient. She walked through it without editorializing. The 2018 recall decision and the documentation that supported it. The suppressed safety reports. The brake actuator fault. The 47 vehicles. Rebecca Cole. And Logan's warning letter about the Meridian Series aircraft, submitted 14 months ago through proper contractor channels. Intercepted. Filed under no action required by the same individual who had buried the original recall 6 years earlier. She saved one piece for last. The navigation interference on her own aircraft. 5 days ago. Not a weather anomaly, a deliberate and targeted suppression of the transponder signal. Traceable through maintenance access logs to a contractor credential that had officially expired 6 months prior, but whose system access had never been revoked. Someone had kept that access open. Someone had used it. The room did not move. Belen's composure cracked the way old plaster cracks. Not all at once, but in hairline fractures running quietly inward from the edges, the structure failing slowly, then becoming visible. "You are going to destroy this family," he said. His voice had gone thin. "Everything your father spent 30 years building." "My father built something honest," Letitia said. "You used it as a place to hide." She slid the board resolution across the table. "I am stepping down as CEO, effective today. Operational authority transfers to the Independent Advisory Board, pending a full external audit. The relevant federal agencies have already received the initial disclosure package." She looked around the table. "The legal process takes it from here." She gathered her folder. "And I am driving to Clearwater Valley this afternoon." Logan was on the porch when she pulled up. Same cabin, same yard, same dirt road. Garrett was inside, the television on, turned slightly louder than necessary, which was his established method of pretending not to monitor a situation while monitoring it completely. Letitia crossed the yard. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps, looked up at Logan. Whatever composure had held her together through 7 hours of board meetings and legal calls was simply spent. She had used the last of it exactly where it was needed. There was nothing left to maintain now. She went to her knees on the bottom porch step. "I looked down on you." Her voice came out unsteady in a way she had not permitted herself in a professional setting in 15 years. She did not try to correct it. "When I came here with that envelope, I had already decided who you were. I treated you like a liability to be managed." She looked up at him. "And you had been trying to protect people, including Rebecca, for years before you ever knew my name, with no expectation of anything in return." Logan looked at her for a moment. Then he reached down, took her hand, helped her to her feet. "We come from 2 different worlds," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "But kindness led us to the same place," he finished. She wasn't sure, afterward, which of them moved first. It didn't matter. The kiss was quiet and unhurried, and had no performance in it. Just two people, on a porch in Clearwater Valley, arriving at something they had both been walking toward since a cold morning on a lake. From the screen door, a 9-year-old boy watched. He smiled. He went back to his birds. But the story that would belong to all three of them, the one worth telling, was only just finding its shape. 1 year later, the ribbon for the grand opening of the Voss Safety Foundation was navy blue, Leticia's choice, though she would tell anyone who asked that it had been Garrett's idea. He had announced at breakfast 3 weeks earlier, with the authority of a 10-year-old who has recently discovered that his opinions are consulted and intends to use that fully, that navy was the most serious color, and serious work deserved a serious color. His reasoning was sound. Nobody argued with it. The foundation's headquarters occupied a modest brick building just outside Seattle, deliberately modest. Leticia had declined the architect's original glass tower concept with some firmness. The work didn't need to look important. The work needed to get done. There was a difference. She had spent the better part of the past year learning to live inside it. Logan stood at the podium in a dark jacket that fit him the way borrowed clothes fit a man who is most comfortable in flannel. Presentably, but with a quiet awareness of the occasion. He spoke for exactly 3 minutes about aviation safety oversight, independent audit structures, the specific gap between what companies are legally required to report and what the flying public has a right to know. He was precise, clear. He did not say a single unnecessary word. A reporter from a trade publication asked him afterward what it felt like to go from a suspended garage mechanic to head of safety advisor at a major aerospace foundation in under 12 months. Logan thought about it honestly. Like a lot of things worked out the way they should have, he said, just slower than they should have, and with more damage along the way than was necessary. The reporter wrote that down carefully. Leticia spoke last. She stood at the podium in a pale gray blazer, hair down, a small change that would not have occurred to her a year ago. She looked out at the assembled crowd, board members, engineers, federal safety officials, a cluster of industry press, and in the third row, a man named Dale from the Clearwater garage, who had come because Garrett had mailed him a hand-addressed invitation in an envelope with a small rocket ship drawn in the lower right corner. Dale had kept the envelope. Logan knew because Dale had mentioned it twice. "I learned something this past year," Leticia said, "that I should have understood much earlier, and that I'm not certain any boardroom ever teaches the way it needs to be taught." She paused. The wealthiest person in any room is not the one with the most to spend. It is the one who is brave enough to live with genuine kindness, especially then. That afternoon, all three of them drove back to Clearwater. No occasion, no agenda, just because it was the place they were from, or had become from, which is perhaps the better kind. The kind you choose instead of simply inherit. Garrett ran ahead to the dock. He had a model airplane under his arm. Not the balsa wood kit anymore, but a proper 14-inch scale model with landing gear that actually retracted. Assembled over 4 Saturday afternoons at the kitchen table, while Leticia sat across from him doing paperwork, occasionally offering a structural observation that turned out, when checked, to be technically accurate. She had a good eye for tolerances. Garrett had noted this and filed it with approval. Logan and Leticia walked to the dock more slowly, in the easy way of two people who no longer need to fill the silence between them. The spring light over Clearwater Lake was the same warm, unhurried gold it had been on a Saturday morning a year ago. That had started like any other and hadn't ended that way. The old fishing boat was still tied to the dock post. The percolator, back at the cabin, would be waiting. Garrett crouched at the end of the dock and set the model airplane on the water with great care. The way you place something you've worked hard on and want to last. It floated. He watched it for a moment. Then he looked up at Leticia. She could see that he had been working up to something. He had that look, the one he got when a thought required more care than usual, when he needed to find the exact right words before he trusted himself to say them out loud. "Mom," he said. He stopped, tried it again, feeling the weight of it, making sure it fit. "Mom," Leticia. Her face did something she had not prepared for. This woman who had sat across from attorneys and regulators and her own uncle without her expression shifting. She pressed her lips together, her eyes filled. She stood on a dock in Clearwater Valley in the afternoon light and simply let it happen. She reached for Logan's hand. "You saved me from the lake," she said, her voice not quite steady. "And I think I saved you from the dark." Logan looked at her, then at Garrett, who was watching them with the satisfied expression of someone who has set something in motion and is pleased with how it's unfolding. "We saved each other," Logan said. The model airplane drifted slowly out across the water, catching the light on its small wings, moving without effort in the easy current toward the open lake. This story teaches us one quiet, practical truth. Kindness is not a feeling. It is a decision you make before you know how it turns out. Logan did not jump into that lake because he was certain it would matter. He jumped because someone needed help, and he was there. You already know how to do this. You have been doing it for decades. This week, call the neighbor who lost her husband in February. Not to say anything in particular, just to ask if she needs a ride to the pharmacy on Thursday. Write one card by hand to the grandchild who never gets mail anymore. And put $1 in the envelope, the way your mother always did. Pull out the chipped Pyrex bowl on Saturday and make something from scratch. Not for a special occasion, just because the doing of it is its own kind of faithfulness. Nobody will hand you an envelope for any of it. That is exactly the point. If someone came to mind while you were listening, someone kind, someone steady, someone who showed up when it mattered most, leave their name in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them.